Are you the kind of player that knows your way around the fretboard relatively well using scales, the modes, triads, pentatonics, but you feel like something's missing and you just want something to kind of tie all that knowledge together so that you can visualize the whole fretboard as one? If you're that kind of person, then this lesson is for you. I'm going to show you one of, if not the best visualization method for your guitar. This will help you see the fretboard a lot clearer and hopefully encourage you to tie in what you see with what you hear. So today we're going to be talking about CAGED. I know there's already a lot of information out there regarding CAGED, but this lesson is specifically aimed at the more experienced player because I feel like there's a lot of information out there about CAGED, which is directed at beginners. If you're not so sure what CAGED is and you want more of a beginner's lesson for that and all of the other theory that I spoke about at the beginning of the video, then check out my practical guitar theory course, which is linked in the description below. So just as a refresher, let's check out the CAGED shapes in the key of C across the neck. So we start off with a C shape, into an A shape, G shape, E shape, and D shape. And obviously that repeats over the next octave of the neck. Now at the moment this has no context other than the fact that I said it's in the key of C, so it's obviously a major key, so let's try and relate the C major scale to these CAGED shapes. Let's begin by playing the first shape, your C shape, and we're going to play the C major scale from root note to root note in that shape. So there's 2 root notes in that shape, and we're going to play, and then we're going to do the same with the A shape. So we got 2 root notes again. Moving on to our G shape, E shape. Now there are 3 root notes in this one, so we can cover a lot more grounds. And lastly our D shape. Hopefully relatively easy to follow along so far. I've just played the major scale from root note to root note in each shape. Now already I want you to get familiar with that, and I don't want you to just play the C major scale. I want you to actually pay attention to the specific intervals that you're landing on. So I'll come back to this later, but I want you to be fully aware of where the 3rd is, where the 4th is, the 5th, and so on within those shapes of the CAGED system. This will help you later when you want to play more advanced shapes and different voicings for the chords rather than just the basic open chord shapes. So let's take a step back and just expand on what we've just spoken about. So we played the C major scale from root note to root note. But if we expand on that and play the C major scale across the entire fretboard, you should notice that those CAGED shapes fall perfectly into the C major scale in different areas of the neck. So if at any point whilst you're playing the C major scale you want to find the root chord, you don't need to jump all the way back to the typical C shape or the bar chord shape. You have a few more options now. So for example, if you're improvising in the key of C, so you can see there at pretty much any point that I wanted to wrap up my phrase, I could find a C chord at my disposal using the 5 CAGED shapes that we've just spoken about. So remember that, key point, the idea here with CAGED is that you should be able to finish your phrase or whatever you're doing at any point on the neck and find one of those CAGED shapes in a close proximity so that you don't have to go all the way to the other side of the neck to find your original chord. This is a great way to play new voicings for chords that you maybe wouldn't expect and just makes your life a whole lot easier. So moving on from here, let's try and relate our modes to the CAGED system. So in the key of C major again, our first mode would be Ionian, which is essentially what we just played. Our second mode would be D Dorian. Now D Dorian is a minor mode, which means that we would have to play the minor CAGED shapes over that. So if we find D here on the top string, 10th fret, we would start off with our E minor shape. Next up would be our D minor shape, followed by C minor, A minor, and then I've pretty much run out of frets, so I can go back on the fretboard and continue on the CAGED system. So you would have hopefully noticed that my CAGED shapes were relevant to the root note. So despite the C Ionian and the D Dorian sharing exactly the same notes, the CAGED shapes moved in context with the key of what I was doing. So another example would be perhaps, let's try the 4th mode of the C major scale, which would be Lydian. So it's like this. So if we were to play the cage shapes over F Lydian here, we would start off with our E major shape, because that's just the most convenient and hopefully the most familiar. From there we would have our D shape, and our C shape, A, G, and so on. And I built all of that from the context of F being our root note and our key. So always remember that. You need to always make sure that everything you play is relevant to the key, the root notes of whatever you're doing. So with that in mind, you have 3 major modes and 3 minor modes, which of course each of the cage shapes would be different for each modes. And then you have 1 diminished mode, which we can't relate to caged because caged only works for major and minor. Now there's 2 more things that I want to leave with you to kind of try, and that's relating your pentatonic shapes, so your major pentatonic and your minor pentatonic shapes, to the caged system. And I want you to also think about arpeggios and how to arpeggiate these cage shapes. So I don't want to give away too much. I want you to kind of do your own homework here and put this into practice. Try and relate as much information as you can that you already have to the cage system. So maybe something you could think about is triads and how triads relate to the cage system. Try to master the cage system in any key. It should be relatively easy because all you have to do is move the shapes up and down accordingly. And if there's one thing that I want you to take away from this lesson, it's a fretboard map. If you link all this information together, you will have a crystal clear map of your fretboard. And then it's really in your hands to choose the right paths on that map. And in order to choose the right paths and link what you see to what you hear, you need to be aware of the intervals of the cage system. So this is what I was talking about earlier on. I want you not only to be aware of where your root notes are with each of the cage shapes, but I also want you to try and figure out where the thirds are, the fifths, and expand on that. Maybe introduce the sevenths and the sixths. I want you to try and become just as quick finding all of your other intervals as you are now finding your root intervals. Once you become good at this, you'll have so much more awareness visually and audibly of the whole neck. And you'll be able to produce all sorts of cool chord voicings based on those cage shapes. So there we go, that pretty much sums up the lesson. This is just the pinnacle of what you can kind of achieve with the cage system, but I really want to just leave this with you now to experiment with yourself. There's plenty of information for you to take away from this lesson. It's really in your hands to put this into practice now. Find as many similarities as you can between your knowledge and the cage system. Try and think more intervallically, so think about your roots, thirds, fifths, sevenths, where these intervals are in relation to the cage shapes. And I recommend that you improvise a lot with this. So choose a scale, a mode, and find as many opportunities as you can with the cage shapes within that. And to expand on that, maybe you could change the cage shapes to seventh chords or other extended chord shapes. It really has endless possibilities here. If you would like a transcript for this lesson, something written down, a summary of the lesson with some diagrams and stuff, then check out my Patreon page where you can grab that. If you have any questions or comments, then make sure you drop them below. Make sure you give me a like on the video, and I'll see you in the next video.